Good morning. It's Jemima, the connection coach. I wanted to address something that has been coming up recently, fairly often. And the question is how to stay in your center when you're in relationship or when you are approaching a connection or an interaction. Now, because most of my clients are women who have done so much self-work already, they're really familiar with all the things that are required to stay centered when they're on their own. And this is such a different prospect to remaining in your center when it comes to being with somebody else. And here's why. Because if you are an empathic, sensitive, highly attuned being, you are going to energetically feel everything about the person in front of you. Specifically, the things that they are not using language to convey as well. You'll just know it. You just have a sense of it. And when you are that tuned in, it's really easy to make allowances and to get into rapport with somebody and to make their experience the focal point of the interaction. Now, this isn't a failing. There's nothing wrong with being so sensitive, with being so attuned. It's a gift. It's amazing. The point here is, can you retain your power? Can you retain the part of you that knows who you are and the part of you that is wise and is desiring to have an adult interaction where both people are sovereign, both people are at choice. So you don't slip into what's actually a tacit manipulation of trying to make the other person feel better or trying to adjust how you are in order that everything is smoother and more comfortable. And the key here is not particularly your self-mastery, because if you are competent at knowing yourself, knowing your patterns, knowing how to handle yourself, then no one can take that from you. The issue here is individuation. If you find it difficult to be individuated, which means you are not quite sure where you end and the other person begins in an energetic and a psycho-emotional kind of way, then you are going to run into problems. And this is something that I see a lot in people who are recovering codependents or potentially anxious attachers. And it presents as sometimes as fawning, if we're talking nervous system responses, and sometimes just as a full-on collapse, full-on energetic collapse where you just kind of give up your side in lieu of letting the other person's energy run the show, which is not only not ideal, but you're not actually then having an adult interaction. It's not two human beings coming together and creating whatever they want to create. It's actually somebody in power and somebody being controlled. So let's talk a little bit about individuation. If you come from conditioning that said that you had to be a certain way in order to be loved, appreciated, in order to belong, chances are this may be residue that you possess. So if you had to mold yourself to different scenarios in order to be loved and accepted, you're going to be really good at this. You're going to be so good at just adjusting to whatever you sense. And it's almost like a hypervigilance. It's like a trauma response, really, because it comes from a deep fear of being abandoned, of not being accepted, of not being loved. And this is why I have such compassion for it. I have experience of it as well, but I have a lot of compassion because, of course, it's so human. That's what we all want. We all want to be loved and accepted and to belong. It's only when this sort of behaviour goes unexamined that it brings us into problematic areas in our relationships. And the result of that is that you won't feel satisfied, because how can you be if you're not fully expressing yourself, but you're kind of giving into how somebody else's energy is running the interaction. And B, it does turn into a manipulation, because if you will basically do anything to make sure that you're loved and accepted, you're not being truthful. And that is just bad for both parties. It really, really is. So individuation requires being initiated into self-trust. There are a lot of ways that this can happen. Some of them are painful. You have to get to a place where you trust yourself, your knowing, and your insights more than you desire to be loved and accepted. That's the bottom line. So as you may be understanding from listening to this, the development of an intrinsic confidence is a key part to this. You really, really need to look inwards and to find that confidence, to find that self-trust. And then when you come into interactions with other people, your communication needs to be absolutely on point. And you may need to dial down your intuitive, sensitive attunement to the other person in place of staying so present with your own experience and just deciding to not self-abandon, because that is what is happening here. When we give up our part in an interaction because we want things to go smoothly, because we are so concerned about how the other person is reacting, we are at some level and to some degree self-abandoning. So when you start to come into that real, true individuation, which, let's face it, it's like an arrested development, because it's something that ideally happens when you're far younger. You learn how to be separate from your caregivers. You learn that when you go away and you come back, they're still there. All of this human development piece is something that in an ideal world gets resolved at a young age. But we don't live in a perfect world. So when it comes to us being adults and getting individuated, then these are the focuses. So self-trust, building confidence,